Hi everyone, this is Matt. Welcome back to Touchgrass Gardening. So the last freeze is over and we're getting ready for spring. So I've got 4 steps that I take every spring to ensure that my garden looks great. It's harvest, trim, plant, and fertilize. Let's go. Step 1, harvest. Now for most of your trees, you're going to want to clear the fruit off before you fertilize so you can get all that new energy, nutrients to go to the new growth. But for some of your trees like big fruit trees, lemons, oranges, you might want to have a few more weeks of fruit to come out, pick and enjoy. And my philosophy is that if it's a mature tree, I'm okay leaving the fruit on even while you fertilize. But for my younger trees, I really want them to grow up fast, establish roots, so I clear off all the fruit for my younger trees. But for my older, mature trees that are established, I'm okay for leaving it on a little bit longer, even though I still fertilize everything at the same time. Step 2 is trimming. The tree right next to me is actually what I just took off the top of my mulberry, which is right next to me. And with a lot of these stone fruits, you're going to want to be trimming pretty hard, because the idea is you want to be able to come out here and pull down the fruit with your hands without having to get a ladder every single time you want to get fruit. And my philosophy with trimming is you want to create space for each major branch so that there's no crossing branches, because that's what's going to cause problems for your tree, create sickness and other issues. And also this will maximize the amount of leaves and fruit that your tree can put on, especially because it's a smaller surface area now that you've trimmed the top of it. And the other idea behind trimming it before it starts budding out is that it's gonna shift all that energy that would have been for the entire huge tree into a much smaller amount of space. So you should get much more fruit from a smaller tree than from a bigger tree. Now the other thing to consider with trimming is that there's different types of trees. So what you just saw me trim was a mulberry, and I also use that same philosophy with stone fruit like peaches, pears, plums. But this is a tropical tree. This is my lychee, and I take a much different philosophy with it, my sensitive tropicals, because I want it to be growing as much as possible everywhere. These are sensitive trees that don't grow well in my area, so any growth I can get, I generally want to leave it. The only thing I'm really trying to do is make sure that it's not touching the ground. So I trim to be about a foot off the ground, and then I look inside and I make sure there's no crossing branches that are rubbing against each other, because that can also cause disease with the tree. But other than that, I just let it grow. And that's what I think the best thing is with tropical trees, is to keep them lush and beautiful looking. And you can see with this lychee, it just loves to grow everywhere. And as long as I can keep it going up, that's what I'm trying to do with tropicals. Step 3 is plant, and this is the most exciting part, because you've waited all winter and you're finally looking at that weather forecast and thinking to yourself, it's not going to freeze again, so it's safe to plant. And for us, we had that mini greenhouse in our bathroom, and you can see that these are some of the seeds that grew up, and these would die if they were in a frost. But I brought them out. I'm ready to put them in my raised bed. I also have the tropicals that I had inside during the winter that I'm about to go plant. So I previously made a video about my bathtub greenhouse for the winter. This is everything that was in there. These tropicals that would defoliate during a frost. And now that I look at the weather forecast, I look at everything in the weather going on, I don't think that there's going to be another frost. So I brought these outside to be in the sun and to start thinking about where I'm going to put them in the yard. So I've got my Barbados cherry, I've got papaya, I've got a silk floss, I've got a royal poinciana and a guava here. And these are all pretty sensitive trees, but now it's time to plant. And again, that's, I think, the most exciting time of the year. The other thing to think about planting right now is a bare root rose. And the reason I like to plant in the spring at this time is you're going to start seeing results immediately. Whereas if you had put this in the fall, it would be looking dead all winter. Whereas now you can see we just put this in and it's already starting to show new growth. So having a bare root rose planted in the spring is a great time, and you're going to see a huge variety of roses in the spring. So I think these are really undervalued plants for how easy they are. So go out and pick up a rose. Step 4 is fertilizing. And the way that I think about fertilizing my trees is I never want to over fertilize, because that's one of the only ways I've ever killed a tree. It's by giving too much fertilizer. So especially with these young trees, you're going to want to look at the back of your fertilizer bag and then put the exact amount or less than what is actually recommended. For me, I've done enough of this at this point where I just sort of eyeball it and put it pretty sparingly. This is, citrus food, chemical fertilizer. And the way that I think about fertilizing is I'll put chemical fertilizer on hardier trees like citrus and stone fruit. But for my tropicals like the lychee, avocado, I'll use only organic fertilizer. And so the difference really is how sensitive the tree is. And for small trees, just really not over fertilizing. But for these bigger trees, I don't overthink it. I just sort of throw fertilizer around the drip line of the tree. Whereas previously I would, drill a hole around the drip line and put fertilizer in there and then soak it. But now at this point, like, these trees are so hardy and established, I just basically just pick it up and throw it around the drip line in just a big circle around where the drip line is, which is the end of where the leaves reach. And I'll just throw it around the whole area and then water it in. So I'll grab the hose and water it in all around and make sure that it gets a good soak all the way around. And then after that, I might even run the sprinklers from my yard to just soak it in even further. So you don't need to fertilize right next to your trunk. You're really going to go in that drip line that's out here. And again, you're going to only use chemical fertilizer with hardy trees. Use that just natural fertilizer for your sensitives and tropicals. So why am I starting this early? This is actually a couple weeks earlier than I would start these 4 steps than in the past. And what I've noticed this year is it's significantly warmer. And there's a couple ways that you can kind of take these different factors and decide for your zone, for your yard, if you should start with spring. And the way that I thought about it is I look at the 14-day forecast. I don't see anywhere near a freeze in the next 14 days. And historically, our final freeze is about at that time, which is in about 14 days. And the other factor is we have an El Nino year. It's been unseasonably warm, and global warming, which has affected us in terms of how hot it gets, but really how those lows are higher than they used to be. Which, if you look at historical data, it's not just that the highs get higher, but what does really change is that the lows get higher, significantly more than the highs getting higher. And for gardeners in temperate zones, like marginal zones like ours, that really affects when spring arrives, and also what you can plant potentially in your yard. So we're starting to plant more and more sensitive tropical trees in the Phoenix area because it's not as cold in the winter anymore. So think about your yard, and if it's time to plant, for me it is. And of course I have an inclination for going earlier than later because I want to get going, because it makes me happy and excited to garden. So if you think all the evidence points towards your spring being here, you should do it and follow my 4 easy steps to making sure that you have a great garden for the summer. If you like this video, I hope you give a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. We're a relatively new channel on YouTube, so if you want to see more of this yard and hear more about what I'm doing in my yard, please subscribe and come back again soon. Thank you.